experience in the Congress, so having served as the Chief of Staff, of course, to the late Jerry Connolly, and we welcome him to Oversight and are excited about his work. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next order of business is ratifying the new subcommittee roster. The clerks have distributed the roster electronically. I ask unanimous consent that the committee approve the appointments and assignments as shown on the roster. Without objection, the subcommittee roster is approved. I would also like to congratulate Mayor Bowser and the D.C. Council on yesterday's passage of the RFK Stadium deal to bring the Washington Commanders back home to Washington, D.C. Congratulations. That's a big deal. This historic private investment will bring crucial jobs and opportunities to the district. I look forward to working with the district on other issues moving forward, including the critical crime crisis we are discussing here today. I now recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. It's been 1 week since the conclusion of President Trump's historic crackdown on crime in our nation's capital, and the results are in. Since President Trump mobilized the National Guard and took control of the Metropolitan Police Department, violent crime has decreased 39%, robberies are down 57%, and carjackings are down 75%. Over 2,300 people have been arrested. Nearly 950 illegal aliens have been detained by ICE, including 20 gang members from violent terrorist organizations. Sex offenders have been taken off the streets. Major drug trafficking operations have been foiled. Authorities thwarted a planned school shooting, cleared 50 illegal tent encampments, and rescued 7 missing children. President Trump's operation was a resounding success and a shining example of how smart on crime policies can keep the residents of and visitors to our nation's capital safe. Prior to President Trump's crackdown on crime, Washington, D.C. was suffering from soaring crime rates as high as the violent 1990s. According to 2024 data, Washington, D.C. has the second highest homicide rate, behind only to Detroit among U.S. cities with under 1 million people. That rate is also higher than many capital cities across the globe. These high crime rates are largely driven by historically high rates of juvenile crime, which were enabled by ultra-progressive, soft-on-crime policies enacted by the D.C. Council and supported by the D.C. Attorney General. In 2018, the D.C. Council amended the Youth Rehabilitation Amendment Act of 1985. Allowing for adults 24 years of age and under to be prosecuted as juveniles for many, even violent crimes, leading to more lenient sentences. The D.C. Council also passed laws in recent years that lowered statutory penalties for violent crimes, eliminated mandatory minimum sentences for all crimes except first-degree murder, and eliminated life sentences entirely. The D.C. Council recently passed laws that greatly hamper the ability of the Metropolitan Police to pursue and apprehend criminals. Officers cannot execute their duties as effectively, leaving morale, retention, and recruitment numbers at historic lows for the Metro Police Department. These actions send every signal to criminals, especially juveniles, that they can commit crimes in the district without accountability. D.C. residents overwhelmingly agree that juveniles who commit violent crimes should face sentences that are proportional to their crimes. Yet the D.C. Attorney General has far too often declined to prosecute juveniles who commit these crimes, justifying his dangerous decisions by saying, quote, "We cannot prosecute our way out of this," end quote. And that quote, "Kids are kids," end quote. Recently, when asked about out-of-control juvenile crime in D.C. and the Youth Rehabilitation Amendment Act, the D.C. Attorney General said, and I quote again, "Our laws are working and the prosecution is working," end quote. Victims of violent crimes and their families might disagree with that assessment. Congressional intern Eric Tarpinian-Jackum was viciously murdered in June while he was simply walking down the street, an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire. 2 17-year-olds were finally arrested just the other week for killing Eric, while a third suspect, an 18-year-old, is still at large. The U.S. Attorney for D.C. revealed that all 3 of these vicious murderers have prior violent juvenile records. Had they been accountable, Eric's murder might have been prevented. Members of Congress and staff have been assaulted, carjacked, and have witnessed violent and traumatic criminal acts. One member of Congress was assaulted in her residence. Another was carjacked at gunpoint. Congressional staff have been victims of armed robbery and carjackings, threatened at knife point, assaulted at gunpoint while walking home, and stabbed in the head while leaving dinner. One of my former professional staff members for the Oversight Committee personally witnessed not one but two separate murders in the district during his tenure with us. One at a Navy Yard restaurant in 2022 and another at a metro station on his way into the office in 2023. The left-wing politicians who say that D.C. does not have a crime problem are either delusional or simply lying to the American people. This body must ensure that the progress made by the president's recent actions endures. That's why last week, this committee passed 14 vital pieces of legislation to restore public safety to the residents and visitors of D.C. While we urge final passage of these bills, the committee also recognizes that the witnesses before us need to do their part to help ensure D.C. residents and visitors are safe. I look very forward to hearing from each of our witnesses as to how they plan to work with Congress and the Trump administration to do so. I now yield to the ranking member for his opening remark.
Thank you, Chairman Comer. Of course, Mayor Bowser, Mr. Chairman, Mr. AG, Mr. Jackson, thank you all for being here today, and of course, most importantly, for your service to Washington, D.C. and to the country. And I want to start just by setting the record straight. Washington, D.C. is a great American city of over 700,000 residents. D.C. has more residents than we know than 2 states. D.C. as a whole contributes more federal taxes than 12 states. And it pays more in federal income tax than 19 other states. More than 8,000 Washington, D.C. residents serve in our military, and we thank them for their service. But these servicemen and women also do not have full democratic representation. They deserve the right and the ability to govern themselves. Now, we also know that crime in D.C. has fallen for the last 2 years, and we all here support public safety. We all want cops to patrol our streets. We all want communities to feel safe. And we also know that flooding the city with troops is not sustainable. So look, and I've said this many times, President Trump is obsessed with trying to run Washington, D.C. And if President Trump wants to run Washington, D.C., he should resign as president and run for mayor. Now, I was a mayor of Long Beach, my hometown, before I came to Congress for 8 years. I love local government. We should, of course, all of us spend our time working with local elected officials. And Congress should not be undermining the elected representatives and the people of Washington, D.C. And if the majority today wants to talk about crime in D.C., in the district, we're happy to talk about crime in D.C. We know that some of the worst crime and corruption in D.C. is actually found at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. President Trump is profiting from his office more than anyone in history. Through his crypto grifts, he has profited $1.2 billion. He's denied the rights of American citizens and deported people illegally without due process. He has broken the law to deploy soldiers on the streets of Los Angeles. He's abused his power and canceled federal spending and intimidated Americans who disagree with him, whether you're a scientist, an elected official, or a late-night talk show host. And he's trying to illegally grab control of the Federal Reserve. He's illegally imposed tariffs. He's ripping away health care from 17 million Americans. All the while, he pretends to be tough on crime. And we know that in his first days in office, Donald Trump pardoned hundreds of his followers who beat, tased, and attacked brave D.C. and U.S. Capitol Police. And right now, since we're talking about crime and corruption in D.C., as we speak, Trump is leading a White House cover-up of the Epstein files. Now, just yesterday, Trump's FBI director falsely claimed that he could not release the files, which we know is false. And let's review the facts. Epstein told the reporter that Trump was his closest friend for 10 years. One survivor also said that Epstein's biggest brag was he was very good friends with Donald Trump. In fact, there was an 8x10 picture framed of Trump on his desk. We know the two are very close. Just last week, our committee released the birthday note that Trump personally wrote to Epstein. It's right here. The note said, by the way, and I'll read it, "May every day be another wonderful secret." That's a disgusting message to send to a sex trafficker. Now, the cover-up of this note might be just as bad as the crime. since we're talking about crime in Washington, D.C. today. Trump filed a $10 billion lawsuit to punish the Wall Street Journal for reporting on the birthday book, which he claimed didn't exist. Now, of course, we've verified that to the world. Now, experts have looked at this. Of course, this is Donald Trump's signature. It certainly looks like the signature to me. At the same time, his administration is cutting deals with a criminal, Ghislaine Maxwell. We know who she is exactly. She's a monster who participated in crimes against up to over possibly 1,000 women. Now, Trump and our Attorney General have not turned over the full Epstein files to our committee, despite a bipartisan subpoena signed by our chairman and this committee. If we want to get tough on crime, if we want to talk about crime in D.C., we need to stand up to where the crime and corruption is happening, and that is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and hold Donald Trump accountable for his record and his actions. It's time for the House majority and Republicans to stand up for the Constitution and take on the biggest crime happening in this country. It's time to release the Epstein files. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Our witnesses today include 3 current District of Columbia government officials and 1 former official from the Biden administration. First of all, we're very honored to have Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser here. Mayor Bowser was sworn into office on January 2nd, 2015, and began her 3rd term on January 2nd, 2023. Welcome, Mayor Bowser. Next, we have Phil Mendelson, Chairman, Council of the District of Columbia. He was sworn into office as chair on June 13th, 2012. His 5th term as chair began on January 2nd, 2023. Mr. Mendelson has been a member of the D.C. Council since 1999. Welcome. Next, we have Brian Schwab, Attorney General of the District of Columbia. He was sworn into office on January 2nd, 2023. Welcome, sir. And finally, we have Gregory Jackson. Mr. Jackson served as the Deputy Director of the White House of Gun Violence and Prevention and Special Assistant to the President during the Biden administration. Again, thank you all for joining us. I look forward to this discussion today. I'll say again, the purpose of this hearing is to try to determine solutions to the crime crisis in Washington, D.C., and how we can work together to make sure that the district is safe for all the residents and all the visitors who come here on a daily basis from all over the world. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise the right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show that the witness has answered in the affirmative, and thank you all. You may take a seat. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statement and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Please limit your oral statement to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it is on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we would ask that you please wrap up. I now ask Mayor Bowser to begin the opening statement segment of this hearing. And Mayor Bowser, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Garcia, and members of the committee. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm Mayor of Washington, D.C., and I'm joined by the Chairman of the D.C. Council, Phil Mendelson, and the Attorney General for the district, Brian Schwab. I'm pleased to be here today to report on the state of the district. First, a bit of a primer about my hometown. As you know, in 1973, Congress passed the District of Columbia Home Rule Act, creating a local government with an elected mayor and elected city council. We are represented in this body by a mighty warrior, Eleanor Holmes Norton, but she does not have a vote, and we have no representation in the Senate. D.C. residents are full-blooded, tax-paying Americans. We are a donor state. We give more to the federal government than we get back. We have all the responsibilities of citizenship, but not the most important benefits: representation and full autonomy. I'm proud to report that the state of the district is strong, and while we face macroeconomic headwinds, with our continued sound financial management and your help, our economic growth outlook can improve. I recently sent to the council our 30th consecutive balanced budget with no new taxes or fees, a budget that reflects the sober reality of our time. Declining revenues due to the unfortunate continuation of remote work, the reduction and relocation of DC-based federal workers, and other macroeconomic shifts. In 2024, we had the fastest growing population in the nations. Our schools grew in enrollment and achievement. Our parks system was rated #1. Over 27 million people visited our city, besting our previous record. Our metro system rebounded faster than other transit systems in the nation, and we drove down violent crime by 35%. Let me say something about our public safety ecosystem. It is unique. Like what happened in most jurisdictions across the country post-COVID, we experienced a violent crime spike in 2023. When I was last here, I explained how we would drive down those trends, and it is working. Today, compared to 2023, burglaries are down 34%, theft, motor vehicle theft, 37%, homicide down 44%, robberies down 60%, and carjackings are down 71%. Overall, violent crime is down 53% compared to 2023. And in the recent federal surge, we accelerated those gains, including a 1-month reduction in carjackings of 75%. In my last visit, I also explained the peculiarities of our system. We are very proud of the men and women of MPD who commit their lives to protecting the nation's capital, and they have my commitment to get back up to 4,000 officers with critical changes to our policy environment, a 13% raise, and enhanced recruitment efforts. MPD makes arrests. Most adult cases, however, are prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney for D.C., who is part of the United States Department of Justice. Our youth offenders are prosecuted locally by our Attorney General, and our Department of Youth and Rehabilitation Services, a local agency, is responsible for their commitment. But our youth and adult offenders are supervised by federal agencies. DC Jail is local, but most of our residents who are committed to detention are in federal facilities across the nation. Our judges are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. We currently have 13 vacancies. As I've told you, we are putting every resource necessary towards public safety. I've authorized the chief to use the overtime necessary to make sure we have adequate police on the streets. We spent 1.8 million hours of overtime last year at a cost to us of $75 million. I've also reported to you previously that we engage regularly with regional and federal partnerships, including the United States Attorney, the FBI, and the ATF. And that's why we will continue to use enhanced federal resources as outlined in my mayor's order, creating the DC Safe and Beautiful Emergency Task Force. In 2023 and in the years since, we pushed for legislation to rebalance our public safety ecosystem, including the Secure DC Omnibus. I'm out of time now, Mr. Chairman, but throughout the questions, I hope to also explain to you other ways that the Congress can be helpful, including helping us get back to 4,000 officers, fully funding the president's, when it comes, requests for beautification and safety efforts in DC to support America 250, helping with our homeless services, especially bridge housing that is working to get people off the streets. And finally, as we were able to do, Mr. Chairman, with the RFK legislation, their finance and economic resilience opportunities, like creating an opportunity zone, or DC's Act 60, like Puerto Rico's, to ensure the economic resilience of the nation's capital.
Thank you. Very good. I now recognize Chairman Middleton for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Garcia, Congresswoman Norton, members of the committee. I'm Chairman of the Council of the District of Columbia. Our form of government is nearly identical to yours. The council's relationship to the mayor is the same as yours to the president. I'm pleased to testify and to finally present our views on matters that are clearly of concern to the committee. We are a beautiful city. Our public parks are well maintained. Our roads are in good condition. We have a world-class public transit system. Our public education system is a leader in the country in terms of choice and a leader among large city systems in terms of growth and academic achievement. Political rhetoric notwithstanding, criminal activity has been on the decline, with violent crime dipping to a 30-year low last year and even lower this year. The percentage of our citizens with health insurance is one of the highest in the country. Public lands, public transit, public education, public safety, public health, core functions of government, and we are doing well. And we are well managed. We adopt a balanced budget on time every year. We spend within our budget every year. We've had clean audits every year. We continue to maintain strong cash reserves. All of our pension programs are fully funded. And we continue to maintain AAA and AA plus financial ratings, despite Wall Street's expressed concern over the negative economic impact of federal actions. Despite these pluses, we are a city under siege. It is frustrating to watch this committee debate and vote on 14 bills regarding the district without a single public hearing, with no input from district officials or the public, without regard for community impact, nor a shred of analysis including legal sufficiency or fiscal impact. Bills like H.R. 5183, the District of Columbia Home Rule Improvement Act, make the district less efficient, less competitive, and less responsive to the needs of a highly complex, unique local government that serves local, county, and state functions. The SOAR Improvements Act would actually hurt 50,000 school kids in the district by defunding the D.C. public school system by approximately $17.5 million. It also would void a long-standing compromise agreed to by Congress with district officials. H.R. 5140, the Juvenile Sentencing Reform Act, is actually criminogenic. Data suggests that juveniles tried as adults are not scared straight, but rather are more likely to reoffend sooner and more often than those treated in the juvenile system. Moreover, you criticize the council for being soft on crime, but the current age thresholds this bill repudiates were enacted by Congress. Over the last several years, the council has taken steps to strengthen our criminal laws, and I will note that we have been able to pass these bills while Congress has not. For instance, we have strengthened the probability of pretrial detention. Even before we did that, the rearrest rate for individuals released pretrial was among the lowest in the country. We have strengthened, by clarifying and imposing new penalties, the criminal laws including shoplifting, carjacking, strangulation, and felony endangerment with a firearm. We have reinstated police resource officers in our schools, and we have taken a number of steps to support our police, including approving just yesterday a 13% pay raise for police officers and approving hiring incentives to increase the ranks of our police force. And we're about to adopt a deferred retirement option program to make service more attractive and to incentivize officers to stay longer. Instead of blaming the council, there are tangible actions we need from you because our public safety system is part federal. For instance, the greatest deterrents to crime are arrest and prosecute, but the U.S. Attorney prosecutes our criminals. And the best way to reduce recidivism is prison programming, but the U.S. Bureau of Prisons is responsible for this. And to further reduce rearrests for ex-offenders and pretrial suspects, we need two federal agencies, CSOSA and Pretrial Services, better resourced. If Congress really wants to further reduce crime in the District of Columbia, here's what you can do. Fill USAO vacancies. Double the funding we already provide for MPD hiring bonuses. Adequately fund CSOSA and the Pretrial Services Agency. Fully reimburse MPD for protecting the federal presence. The underfunding by Congress over the last 4 fiscal years totals $83 million. Submit and confirm our judicial nominees. Our courts have a 20% vacancy rate in judges, backlogging the criminal docket. Amend the Federal Privacy Act so that more data can be shared between federal and local law enforcement agencies. Allow our local attorney general to prosecute all misdemeanors because the United States attorney usually does not. And help us pay for a new jail, which houses federal prisoners, just as Congress helped pay for a new forensic lab 15 years ago. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I appreciate the committee's attention, and I also want to welcome Congressman Garcia as the new ranking member.
Thank you. Now recognize General Schwab for his opening statement.
Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Garcia, Congresswoman Norton, members of the committee, I'm Brian Schwab, D.C. Attorney General, and I'm pleased to testify about the work my office is doing to advance the district's interests and to make Washington, D.C. safer and more affordable for everyone. I'm a third-generation Washingtonian. My wife and I raised our 3 daughters here. I love this city. Just like your home districts, D.C. is made up of vibrant neighborhoods, hardworking, talented people who are the backbone of our culture and our economy. We are small business owners, veterans, teachers, nurses, and police officers, committed civil servants. We are Americans who deserve the same freedom to govern ourselves as your constituents enjoy. But unlike your constituents who benefit from having you here to advance their interests, the more than 700,000 residents who call D.C. home have no vote in Congress. We do, however, have elected local leaders, including an elected Attorney General. As Attorney General, I am committed to ensuring Washingtonians have a first-rate public law office, enforcing their laws, protecting their taxpayer dollars, and advancing the public interest. My office handles thousands of matters across an array of issues, from enforcing child support orders and protecting domestic violence victims to holding companies accountable for fueling the opioid crisis. We protect seniors and consumers from scams. We go after slumlords. We defend district agencies, including our police department, securing and saving hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Nothing is more important to the work we do than making the district safer for everyone who lives here, works here, and visits here. As you've heard, D.C.'s criminal justice system is unique, and its structure is often a source of confusion. Unlike anywhere else in the country, the responsibility for prosecuting local crime in the district is divided between the federal government, the United States Attorney's Office, which handles all adult felonies and most adult misdemeanors, and my office, which prosecutes juvenile delinquency cases and certain adult misdemeanors. Because the vast majority of crime in the District of Columbia is committed by adults, not juveniles, it is the U.S. Attorney's Office that handles the vast majority of prosecution. Despite our limited jurisdiction, we take our responsibility over juvenile prosecution seriously. Our attorneys aggressively prosecute violent juvenile offenses whenever there is sufficient evidence to meet the burden of proof. Kids must face consequences, swift and certain consequences when they break the law. And our prosecutors work every day to hold them accountable and ensure victims receive justice. Last year, we prosecuted 84% of all violent juvenile cases, including over 90% of homicides and attempted homicides, 87% of carjackings, and 86% of gun cases. Crime rates last year reached 30-year lows and have continued to decline this year. But there is more work to be done. We must continue to pursue a comprehensive public safety strategy. Effective policing and prosecution are critical, so too are preventive efforts designed to stop crime before it happens. Keeping people safe is not a choice between law enforcement or prevention. We must do both. As the nation's capital, public safety in the district has always required a strong working partnership with federal law enforcement, regardless of who is in the White House. We have worked and will continue to work closely with our federal law enforcement partners every day. But declarations of emergency and unilateral federal actions taken without coordination or advance warning do not promote long-term public safety. Sending masked agents in unmarked cars to pick people off the streets, flooding our neighborhoods with National Guardsmen who are untrained in local policing, attempting a federal takeover of our police force, none of these are durable, long-lasting solutions for driving crime down. In fact, they threaten to destroy critical trust between local communities and the police, trust which is essential to effective, efficient policing and prosecution. There are constructive ways the federal government can work with us to continue driving crime down. For example, Congress can help combat the flood of illegal guns pouring into our city. 95% of illegal guns that end up on our streets come from outside the district. We also need help filling longstanding judicial vacancies, confirming our highly qualified nominees. The vacancy crisis has led to severe case backlogs, with felony cases being scheduled into 2027, resulting in delayed justice for crime victims and the community. Finally, Congress could help by investing desperately needed services in facilities like a psychiatric residential treatment facility for youth with serious mental and behavioral health issues that often contribute to crime. All of us, DC's elected officials, members of Congress, we have a shared goal of continuing to make durable improvements to public safety in the District of Columbia. I and my office are ready to have serious discussions on how best to do that with anybody who is willing in good faith and in a spirit of partnership to have them with us. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, General. Now I'll recognize Mr. Jackson for his opening statement.
All right, thank you, Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Garcia, Congresswoman Norton, and the committee for having me. I'm Greg Jackson, a D.C. resident, a survivor of gun violence, and the former Deputy Director for the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. This was an office that coordinated federal resources, implemented life-saving policies, and coordinated with local leaders to achieve a 13.2% reduction in violent crime and a 31% reduction in homicides nationwide in just 2 years. I spent the last decade of my life working to address this crisis, from consoling a mother who lost her 10-year-old who was buying ice cream in D.C. to walking the hallways in Parkland with families that have lost their loved ones to school shootings. And we've seen firsthand how this is destroying too many families in our country. This is now the leading cause of death for youth in America, the leading cause of death for pregnant women in America, and now the leading cause of newly disabled Americans. With 1 in 5 Americans being impacted by this violence, this is also personal for me. I'm a survivor of gun violence as I was shot. The bullet hit 2 arteries. I've also lost my teenage mentee, DeMarcos, from a shooting. And I've also sat with families throughout this district. Despite this crisis we face, the last few years have shown us that we do have solutions that work. In the previous 2 years, D.C. and cities across the country have seen historic reductions in gun violence without the deployment of masked agents or the military. We did this by investing in prevention and intervention efforts to communities at risk and strategically investing in law enforcement to keep illegal guns off of our streets and to close homicides. Recently, even the current FBI director, Kash Patel, celebrated historic levels or historic reductions in violent crime. But we know that's not the product of a few months of troops or FBI actions. They are the result of billions in prevention resources, law enforcement, and community leaders risking their lives every day, as well as the transformative policies implemented over the last few years. Without masked agents and troop deployments, we've seen homicides drop 54% in Baltimore, 20% in Atlanta, 41% in Phoenix, 27% in Los Angeles, and as shared by district leadership, violent crime in D.C. is down by 53%. We got here in major part because Republicans and Democrats came together to enact a bipartisan law that provided historic resources for violence prevention, law enforcement strategies, as well as enhanced our background check system for those under 21, preventing domestic abusers from accessing guns, making the largest investment in youth mental health in history, as well as community violence intervention, and making gun trafficking a federal crime, prosecuting those who are flooding guns into our communities. These strategies, in partnership with local leaders, reduced homicides again by 31% and mass shootings by 20% in our country. As our communities have been fighting our way out of this crisis, we find ourselves at a dangerous crossroad. Instead of adding more federal resources to solutions that work, the Trump administration has dismantled and defunded bipartisan strategies passed into law to reduce violence. They shut down the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. They defunded law enforcement, including the ATF. They cut over $1 billion in mental health resources for our schools, terminated $812 million in funding for community violence intervention programs, defunded gun violence research, shut down the CDC Firearm Injury Center, dismantled important regulations like the zero tolerance policy for gun dealers, and now plans to further defund critical resources to address the root causes of violence like housing, employment, and health care. And here in D.C., the administration and Congress's actions have been extremely harmful, withholding over $1 billion of D.C. local tax dollars, undermining our leadership and flooding our neighborhoods with military to instill fear in everyday Americans. Look, I live in Ward 8, a community that the White House has called a slum. But for us, this is a neighborhood where we walk our dogs, we listen to jazz on Sundays, we grill out during the summers, and most importantly, like any neighborhood, we support each other. But since this D.C. Trump takeover, we hear sirens nightly. We've seen buildings raided daily, like the building of young Mackay, who's sitting behind me. We've seen elderly harassed on their porch, and now even traffic jams from the flood of police and military on our streets. This deployment of federal troops that's essentially making us feel hostage in our own homes is not the federal support we need. And most importantly, it's costly, costing our country an estimated $200 million for one city alone. To be tough on crime, we need a different approach. We need a federal law enforcement that focuses on keeping guns out of our communities in the first place. We need to be tough on crime by fully funding the ATF to catch gun traffickers, to shut down rogue gun dealers, to disrupt dangerous black markets of firearms. To be tough on crime, we need to protect and fund the bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was passed and is working. To be tough on crime, we must hold the billionaires accountable that have put weapons from the battlefield into our backyards. And to be tough on crime, we must fund resources for communities that are most at risk to prevent violence before it happens. We have real solutions to save lives from gun violence and reduce violent crime, and now is the time to protect that progress and continue to build on that momentum. Thank you. And Chairman, if you will, I do want to request, we had a really terrible tragedy last night where 5 officers were shot and 3 were lost, and I would kindly like to request we honor them with a moment of silence, if you will.
Absolutely. Join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your statement, Mr. Jackson. That concludes our opening statements. We're now going to proceed with questions. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Dr. Gosar, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mayor Bowser. I often say that trust is a series of promises kept, and it's been made clear that Congress can't trust the swamp to enforce the rule of law. Last week, this committee passed my bill, the District of Columbia's Home Rule Improvement Act, to ensure our nation's capital is safe, stable, and governed responsibly. Congressional oversight is vital to rehabilitate the District of Columbia from its chronic crime epidemic and restore law and order. Failed leadership, soft on crime policies, rampant corruption has left D.C. more dangerous than war-torn Baghdad. This committee's investigation reveals Metro PD falsified crime statistics, while the Attorney General's office seals the juvenile criminals records to protect those so-called minors. But let's be honest, they aren't kids. These are 24-year-old criminals. By allowing adults to be tried as minors, Washington, D.C. is aiding and abetting criminal activity that threatens the lives of residents, visitors, and everyone who works in our nation's capital. Washington, D.C. must earn back the trust of President Trump and Congress, but it does not happen just by blatantly manipulating crime statistics, seeking politically motivated litigation, and spending irresponsibly. Mayor Bowser, I must tell you, I've never felt safer in D.C. There's a record low crime rate, an increase in gang-related arrests, and friendly National Guardsmen patrolling the streets. Why is D.C. safer now than it was 38 days ago?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. And as I explained when we were here 2 years ago, it is true that we experienced, like many places, a spike in 2023. I can say unequivocally, this is not 2023. In each of the past 2 years, we have driven down crime. In 2023, we finished the year 35% down. Last year, we finished the year, I believe, 24% down. And all throughout this year, we were driving down to more than a 20% decrease in violent crime. I have also testified that during the surge, we experienced many hundreds of federal officers and agencies that we typically work with, and we did experience further decreases in all categories. The most substantial was in carjackings.
Gotcha. Now, Chairman Mendelson, you voted in favor of the Youth Rehabilitation Amendment Act of 2013, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, if this bill allows adults under 25 years old to be prosecuted as minors, in 2023, you testified before this committee that there was no crime crisis in D.C. Now, if there's no crime crisis, then why did you establish the D.C. Violence Fatality Review Committee back in 2018, right before passing the Youth Rehabilitation Amendment Act? In fact, hold on, no, no, no.
Sure.
In fact, this review committee, according to the D.C. Code, Chapter 14A, is tasked with examining crimes against adults 19 years old and older. This makes no sense. So, Chairman, are 19-year-olds only considered adults when they're victims, not the criminals creating them and creating more and more violent crimes? Your juvenile curfew emergency declaration resolution of 2025 states, since 2023, the district has seen a rise in unruly behavior by juveniles. Which is it? Yes or no? Do you admit that there has been a rise in juvenile crime here in D.C. under President Trump's declared public safety emergency?
That there's been a increase in juvenile crime in the last month? I've not seen the data. I don't think so, though.
Okay.
But let me just say that the Youth Rehabilitation Act doesn't allow adults to be prosecuted as minors. They're still prosecuted as adults.
Well, I mean, it's very confusing when you have the definition of a minor is 25 and under. And then your statistics actually, you look at victims at 19 years and younger. So it has to be statistically you can make anything work with statistics.
Well,
So it's got to be one way or the other.
as you know, each law sometimes has its own definition. So for purposes of YRA sentencing, we define younger adults under 24, but that's not the same as they're being prosecuted as juveniles. Our criminal code is quite clear that anyone who's under 18 is prosecuted as a juvenile unless they are, for the most serious crimes, murder and sexual crimes, they are, by the U.S. Attorney, chosen to be prosecuted as adults.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you,
yield
Chair.
back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Mr. Garcia from California.
Thank you, Chairman Comer. I want to just also say this clearly, and I know that we all believe this. Violent crime, we know, has no place in our communities. People absolutely have a right to be concerned about crime. As a former mayor, and a lot of us have been in local government, we know that those concerns are real on the ground. Now, Democrats believe in investing in solutions that actually make people safer. Now, Mayor Bowser, Chairman Mendelson, Attorney General Schwab, now can each of you just confirm with a yes or a no that you agree with me that one, we need to make sure that we have local officers on the beat, that two, that we're investing in community partnerships and organizations on the ground, and three, that we're building trust with law enforcement. Are those things important, Mayor Bowser?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
A.G. Schwab? Yes. Thank you. Now, Mr. Jackson, is it also true that President Trump has actually destroyed and eliminated many of the programs which fight gun violence and save lives?
Yes, sir.
And did President Trump also not eliminate the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, of which, of course, you were very involved in leading?
Yes.
Thank you. And also, Mr. Jackson, is it not true that the Office of Gun Violence Prevention and the other work in the administration was literally focused on making this country safer?
That's correct.
Now, Mayor Bowser, as a former mayor, I know how hard, of course, you are working to keep people safe. You have said that mass ICE agents on the streets of D.C. are not helping, which I appreciate, and all of us appreciate. And of course, today we could be talking about more community policing. We could be talking about illegal guns. We could be talking about real partnerships and fully funding Washington, D.C. But we can't do that, of course, because the majority continues to ignore the crimes and corruption at 1600 Pennsylvania and the corruption of this administration. Now, we can't pull out a full map of Washington, D.C., but there are other corruption hotspots across the district. Now, let's look right next door to the White House. Here is the headquarters of the Office of Management and Budget. Just next door, OMB ordered the unlawful freezing of more than $425 billion in congressionally authorized funds. This obviates the law. It's corruption. It's a crime. This has hurt communities in D.C. and across the country. They're blocking funds for energy, education, law enforcement, and much more. Now let's go down the map a few miles south. Here is the Department of Homeland Security, where Secretary Noam has ordered unlawful deportations and unleashed masked federal agents to harm innocent people across the country. And we have no idea, by the way, of who's following that and who's not. Who's following what rule, who is not. What we do know is that the legal rights of people and due process is being ignored. If we go up the map back to the north on Maryland Avenue, we have the Department of Education, also in D.C., more crimes and corruption. Here, the Trump administration illegally froze billions of dollars of K-12 and adult education funding. They even froze funding for mental health. And they're trying to illegally dissolve the agency in violation of the law. Again, more crimes and corruption in Washington, D.C. This would devastate children across the country, especially those with disabilities. Now, if we go back downtown, here's the Department of Commerce, where Trump and the Secretary are breaking the law by illegally imposing tariffs without congressional approval. And all is being done in violation of the law, according to the U.S. Court of Appeals. And finally, if we go across the river, another part of D.C., to the Pentagon, Secretary Hegseth is politicizing the military. He leaked classified information, putting Americans in uniform at risk, and he's illegally seized control of the National Guard and ordered soldiers to illegally engage in law enforcement activities. And so we can map D.C., we can map where crimes is happening, we can map where corruption is happening. This, of course, is all we know, just the tip of the iceberg. Now, we could list nearly every agency across the government and every federal building on a map at where crimes and corruption are happening in the district. But we will not, in this process, be silent where this crime and corruption is happening. I want to thank, again, all of our witnesses for your work to lower crime in the district and to lower the temperature across your population. I thank you all very much. With that, I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Grofman from Wisconsin.
Thank you very much. I'll point out this idea of crime going up or down. Crime, it depends what year you take as your base year. I guess in Washington, D.C., the all-time high was in 1992, where we had 482 murders. That's just almost beyond belief. Last year, we had 187. If you go back 10 years to 2014, we had 105. So you could say the murder rate almost doubled, or you could look at what we were at 220 and say it fell dramatically. But in any event, I think the number of murders in Washington, D.C. is an embarrassment. The amount of crime is an embarrassment. I guess the thing is what we're doing to solve it, and we just heard 4 experts apparently on the topic give their opinion. I sometimes, when I'm back in my district, which is not Washington, D.C., do ride-alongs with local police, local sheriffs, local police, what have you. And I ask them what the causes of crime, and almost uniformly they talk about the breakdown in the family and how families are not as strong as they once were, is how they're not fathers in the family. And I think if you look at statistics, which are hard to find on the background of people committing crimes, you frequently look at what I would describe as weak families and fatherless families. Nevertheless, 4 of you in your prepared statements and talked about what we're doing to reduce crime. Not one of you mentioned the decline of the role in the decline of the role of the father in the family over the last. It's been just getting worse over the last 60 years. I'd like to ask you: are any of you doing anything to try to keep more fathers at home and being mentors for these kids? The vast majority of murders are committed by males. Are you doing anything along the line to get the fathers back in the home?
Congressman, let me answer that by saying and I know that I focused a lot on our law enforcement efforts, but we commit to and invest in a lot of prevention efforts as well, from incredible and effective funding of our public schools to our...
Yeah, I only got 5 minutes. We
Yes,
got to
to
address
our-
the topic. What are we
Yes.
doing to get fathers in the home?
Well, sir, we we take the position that we support families in whatever form they come in, and we make investments that the government is responsible for. Great schools, great health care, safe streets.
Mr. Jackson, could you want to try to answer that question? Are you doing anything?
Yes,
Talk about the
a
importance.
major priority for funding for community violence intervention programs focus directly on mentorship with young men. In DC, we have a program called Pathways. We work directly with those who are most at risk, and it's about everything from not just preventing violence, but how to strengthen their ability to be fathers, to be leaders, to be providers and protectors in the home.
Well, are we doing anything to make sure that a higher percentage of children born in the district are born in families in which there's a father in the home? Are we doing something to address that problem, which to me is the big problem? And again, we have these hearings on crime, and none of the witnesses seem to be addressing the root cause of the whole problem.
If I can, that $812 million that was terminated by the Trump administration cut community violence intervention programs. Many of them do precisely that. So if that's a priority, we should be funding, doubling down, and scaling out that work.
I'm not sure that's true, but any other guys, Mr. Schwab, are you aware of anybody doing anything to talk about the importance with Washington's youth of having a dad at home when that child is born? Is anybody addressing that problem in the city?
Every day, all day, sir, people are talking about how do we strengthen the family, how do we strengthen communities for young people, how do we make sure that young people have role models, family members, and others. Let me mention one other thing that's important from the work that my office does that doesn't make a lot of press. But one of the things we have a responsibility to do is do child support enforcement. And we know
No, that's not the problem. The problem
Non-custodial-
is we don't need a guy paying child support or having his wages garnished.
We-
The problem is we need a guy in the home. So what are we doing about getting the guy in the home?
We're trying to make sure in the enforcement of our child support rules that we are lowering the friction between non-custodial parents and custodial parents
Okay,
so that
so-
kids raised in the home have
So we're
both
not
parents
addressing the
engaged.
problem. Okay, thank you.
Well, I don't agree that we're not addressing the problem at all. We are trying to increase family stability. No government can force a couple to be together but we are, for instance, we have vigorous programs with regard to reducing teenage pregnancy.
Judge,
We are trying to reduce the
Gentlemen,
cycle
time's
of poverty.
expired. Chair recognizes Ms. Norton from Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from 60 groups led by DC Vote, a letter from 150 groups led by the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and a letter from the National Urban League and the Greater Washington Urban League.
Without objection, to ordered.
District of Columbia residents have all the obligations of American citizenship, including paying federal taxes, serving on juries, and registering with Selective Service. Yet Congress denies them full self-government and voting representation in Congress. The only solution to this undemocratic treatment is to grant D.C. statehood. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from leading constitutional scholars explaining why D.C. statehood bill H.R. 51 is constitutional.
Without objection, to ordered.
The admissions clause of the Constitution gives Congress authority to admit new states. All 37 new states were admitted by Congress. The district clause of the Constitution gives Congress authority to reduce the size of the federal district, which Congress did by 30% in 1846. H.R. 51 reduces the size of the federal district from 68 square miles to 2 square miles, consisting of the White House, the Capitol, the Supreme Court, and the National Mall, and remaining under the control of Congress, under control of Congress. The new state consists of residential and commercial areas of D.C. The admissions clause does not establish any prerequisites for the admission of new states, but Congress generally has considered 3 factors: support for statehood, commitment to democracy, and resources and population. 86% of D.C. residents voted for statehood in 2016. D.C. residents have demanded democratic rights for more than 220 years. D.C. has a larger gross domestic population than 16 states and a higher per capita gross domestic product than any state. D.C. has the higher per capita personal income than any state. D.C. has a larger population than 2 states. Republicans do not like that D.C. votes for Democrats, so they deny D.C. statehood. Mayor Bowser, Chairman Mendelson, and Attorney General Schwab, my question for you is, why should D.C. be a state?
Representative Norton, across the globe, Washington, D.C. symbolizes the power and the virtue of a representative democracy, a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. And yet, the 700,000 of us that live here in the District of Columbia are the only residents of the capital of a democratic country that do not have a voice in our national legislature. That's wrong. That's un-American. D.C. residents are Americans too. The lack of voting representation harms the District of Columbia. We, at this moment in our country, should be expanding democracy, not constraining it.
And Congresswoman, if I can add to Attorney General Schwab's remark, because frequently people focus on our lack of representation, and that is certainly an affront to us as tax-paying Americans. What gets less focus, but has come into focus over the last several weeks, is that we lack full autonomy. So for all intents and purposes, we function like a state. I function as our jurisdiction's governor and county executive and mayor. We perform the duties that all states are asked, and we don't do anything less. But we don't have control of our National Guard, and a peculiarity of our home rule charter, a president can declare an emergency in the district. So lack of full autonomy also prevents us from using the money that we raised in taxes, like happened this year. Taxes that we raised in the district cut from our approved budget, which forced us to cut services, including the pay raises that our police officers are due, being delayed until this October.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Now the chair recognizes the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Jordan from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mendelson, is crime up or down in the last month here in D.C.?
It's down.
Down significantly, right? Robberies down 42%, deadly weapon assaults down 13%, carjackings down 85%, car theft down 24%, violent crime down 25%. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Before last year, before the surge, violent crime was down 26%. After the surge, violent crime was down 27%.
Yeah, I thought you would say that before the surge that violent crime was down. But the chairman of the Fraternal Order, in fact, you said, I think you tweeted out, or you put a statement out on August 12th, violent crime in the district is at its lowest levels we've seen in 30 years.
Correct.
But the head of the Fraternal Order of Police, Mr. Pemberton, said, when our members respond to the scene of a felony offense, inevitably there will be a lieutenant or a captain that will show up on the scene and direct those members to take a report for a lesser offense. Are you guys cooking the books?
I think we're not, but I also know that there are a couple of investigations run by this
Well, you
committee.
settled a case too, didn't you? You just settled a case where someone said you were cooking the books. Is that right?
I can't speak to that case. I don't have familiarity.
Well, we know
with
it was settled. It's been reported.
But I do know there are collateral statistics that affirm the reduction in
Is Mr.
crime.
Pemberton lying? Head of the FOP?
Yes.
You think he's lying? Wow. Well, let me just read from the court case that was settled. This is the transcript of Mr. Randy Griffin, who's the commander of the Metro Police Department. And he was asked the question in this deposition. He says, Lieutenant Andrew Zabosky Zabowski came up with the classification of taking property without right, correct? He responded yes. Question, so he's saying that you told him to come up with a solution for the theft problem, which is driving up crime statistics for the district, correct? He responded yes. Sounds like you guys are cooking the books there, according to, this is under oath from the deposition from this case that was just settled with the person who brought the action, sergeant in your police department, but you're not cooking the books?
Congressman, may I?
The question was to Mr. Mendelson.
As I've said, there are 2 investigations. I know there's one internal in the Metropolitan Police Department. I know that there's an investigation by this committee. I think that the 3 of us
What's
here
taking
welcome
property
that
without right?
investigation.
What's taking property without right?
Oh, that would be theft.
Why not call it theft? Why come up with this designation? In fact, that's what he says. He's asked the question. He
Congressman,
said,
I can't
the
speak to
solution,
that
the solution
particular
from
case.
Mr. Zabowski was to come up with this TPWR, taking property without right. What is that? Taking property without right is what again?